There is a specific kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot touch. It sits heavy in the marrow of your bones, a density that feels less like physical fatigue and more like a spiritual saturation. You likely feel it most intensely after social interactions that should have been pleasant. Or perhaps you experience it in crowded places, supermarkets, train stations, busy streets, where the sheer volume of human presence feels like a physical assault on your nervous system. You walk into a room feeling relatively neutral, yet, within minutes, a dark cloud descends over you. You feel a sudden, inexplicable rage, or a crushing wave of grief, or a vibrating anxiety that makes your hands tremble. You look for the source within your own life, scanning your recent memories for a trigger, but you find nothing. That is because the emotion does not belong to you. You have spent your life being told that you are too sensitive, that you need to thicken your skin, or that you are simply imagining the weight of the atmosphere around you. You may have even pathologized yourself, wondering if you suffer from a mood disorder because your internal state fluctuates so violently and unpredictably. But whatever you think this is, whatever label modern society has slapped onto your chest to dismiss your experience, it is incomplete. Carl Jung identified this phenomenon nearly a century ago, long before we had the fMRI scans to prove him right. He did not view this permeability as a simple personality quirk or a weakness of character. He viewed it as a dangerous, archaic, yet potentially transcendent state of being. He understood that what you are experiencing is not just empathy in the colloquial sense of being nice. It is a structural openness of the psyche, a lack of distinction between the I and the you. To understand why you feel broken, we must first dissect the mechanism of your suffering. Jung famously noted that mass psychology was one of the greatest dangers to the individual, citing that emotions are contagious. He called this phenomenon psychic infection. When you are in the presence of others, you are not merely observing them, you are metabolizing them. In the Jungian framework, your unconscious mind is not a sealed vault. It is an ocean that connects to the unconscious minds of everyone around you. For the average person, the ego acts as a thick dam, blocking out these tidal waves of external emotion. But for you, the dam is cracked. You possess what I call the osmotic soul paradox. Your ego boundary is porous, allowing the unfiltered content of the collective unconscious to seep into your personal awareness. Modern neuroscience has finally caught up to Jung's intuition. We now know about the mirror neuron system in the premotor cortex and the inferior parietal cortex. In a neurotypical brain, these neurons fire when you perform an action, and they fire in the same pattern when you watch someone else perform that action. They are the biological basis of learning and empathy. However, in your brain, this system is likely hyperactive. When you witness suffering or even suppressed anger in another person, your brain does not just understand it intellectually, it simulates the physiological state of that emotion within your own body. Your anterior insula activates. Your cortisol levels spike. Your heart rate variability shifts to match the person next to you. You are literally running a simulation of their trauma in your own biology. This is why you feel exhausted. You are living a dozen lives in the span of a single day. You are carrying the resonant toxicity of the world in your own bloodstream. This biological reality creates a profound psychological crisis. Jung warned that when an individual cannot distinguish their own unconscious material from the material of others, they are at risk of dissociation or inflation. You might feel this as a loss of identity. Who are you, really, if your mood is entirely dependent on who walks into the room? This leads to a terrifying form of camouflage. You develop a survival mechanism, a false persona, designed to mirror back what others need from you, simply to keep the peace and lower the emotional voltage in the room. You become a shapeshifter, not out of manipulation, but out of necessity. If you can make the angry person calm, you get to feel calm. If you can fix the sad person, You stop feeling the crushing weight of their sadness. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. You become the eternal therapist, the listener, the rock for everyone else, while internally you are disintegrating. Jung observed that this type of person often attracts narcissists or chaotic individuals, what he might describe as people possessed by their own shadows. They are drawn to you like moths to a flame because you offer them a vessel. You unwittingly sign a contract to carry their emotional baggage for them. They project their chaos onto you, and because of your osmotic soul paradox, you accept it. You identify with it. You think, I am anxious, when in reality you are merely vibrating with the anxiety of the person sitting across from you. This is where the danger lies. Jung argued that the unconscious is compensatory. If you spend your conscious life being the healer, the absorber, or the saintly empath, your unconscious will begin to build a counterforce. The more you suppress your own needs to accommodate the energy of others, the darker your own shadow becomes. You may have noticed this already, moments where the empath shuts off and a cold, detached, almost cruel observer takes over, or moments of sudden volcanic rage that seem to come out of nowhere. This is the backlash of your own psyche. You are not just a benevolent sponge, you are a pressure cooker. To illustrate this specific pathology and the hidden power buried within it, we must look at a specific archetype Jung encountered frequently in his clinical practice. It is the story of the individual who has lost their own center of gravity. Let us consider the case of a patient we shall call Elias. Elias was a man who could walk into a room and immediately identify the person who was suffering the most. He was a chameleon, a man of high social intelligence who was beloved by his peers because he made them feel deeply seen. But Elias suffered from chronic, debilitating fatigue and a recurring nightmare where he was drowning in a sea of grey, faceless bodies, unable to scream because his mouth was filled with water. Jung's analysis of Elias was sharp and unforgiving. He did not praise Elias for his compassion. Instead, he pointed out that Elias was suffering from a lack of psychic immunity. Elias had no skin. In his attempt to be everything to everyone, he had become nothing to himself. He was possessed by the archetype of the wounded healer, but he was trapped in the wound, never reaching the healing. Jung realized that Elias's empathy was actually a form of defense, a way to control his environment by merging with it. But this merging was killing him. It is likely killing you too. However, Jung did not believe this trait was a mistake of nature. He believed that the ability to sense the unconscious currents of others was a precursor to a higher form of consciousness. But to reach that higher ground, you must first survive the descent. You must understand the different stages of this condition, because if you remain stuck in the first stage, the stage of the unconscious victim, you will eventually burn out or succumb to the very darkness you are trying to heal. Jung suggests that this sensitivity is raw material. It is lead that must be transmuted into gold. But the alchemical process is painful. It requires you to do the one thing that feels most unnatural to your instincts. It requires you to close the door. We can categorize this journey into distinct phases. If you are watching this, you are likely trapped in the first phase, unaware that there is a progression you are supposed to be following. You are suffering because you are using a jet engine to power a bicycle. You are using a tool of immense psychological power, the ability to bridge the gap between minds, solely to torture yourself with the unresolved neuroses of your friends, family and co-workers. Let us break down the taxonomy of this experience. There are signs you have missed, subtle indicators that you have crossed the line from healthy empathy into pathological resonance. Identifying where you stand is the first step in reclaiming your autonomy. The first sign is what I categorize as the mirror's crack. This occurs when the reflection you offer the world begins to distort your own self-perception. You lose the ability to answer simple questions about your own desires. What do you want to eat? Where do you want to go? The answers are blank, or they are calculated based on what the other person wants. You have delegated your executive function to the collective mood. This is not flexibility, it is erasure. The second sign is what I call somatic displacement syndrome, because your conscious mind often refuses to acknowledge the toxicity you are absorbing, perhaps because you believe you are strong or kind or spiritual. Your body takes on the burden of expression. The psyche and the soma are not separate entities in Jungian psychology. They are two sides of the same coin. When the mind cannot process a conflict, the body stages it. You experience sudden, splitting migraines in the presence of manipulative people. You develop inexplicable digestive issues before family gatherings. Your autoimmune system flares up when you are forced to work in a disharmonious environment. This is your biological intuition screaming at you. It is the visceral veto. Your body is rejecting the psychic infection that your mind is too polite to decline. You are treating your nervous system like a landfill for other people's emotional refuse, and your biology is staging a revolt. The third and perhaps most dangerous sign is the development of the martyr's shadow. This is the dark secret that most empaths refuse to admit, but Jung would demand we look at it squarely. Deep down, beneath the layers of compassion and caretaking, there is a growing kernel of contempt. You begin to resent the very people you are helping. You feel a secret, burning superiority to them. You think, why are they so weak? Why must I always be the one to carry this? Why is no one asking how I am? This is your shadow self reacting to the imbalance. Jung warned that every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism. You are addicted to the self-image of the savior, and your shadow is furious about the energy cost. If you do not acknowledge this hidden rage, it will eventually consume you, turning you into the very thing you despise. A bitter, passive-aggressive tyrant who uses their sensitivity as a weapon to induce guilt in others. You become the mother who sacrifices everything and then never lets her children forget it. So how do we break this cycle? How do you stop being a victim of your own hardware? The answer is not to shut down your empathy. To become cold and unfeeling would be a regression. It would be a retreat into primitive narcissism. Jung does not ask you to destroy your gift, he asks you to discipline it. He calls for a process of individuation, the deliberate act of becoming a distinct, singular self, separate from the collective soup. This requires you to develop a new psychological organ, a mental structure I refer to as the psychic airlock. Imagine a spaceship. Between the vacuum of space and the habitable interior, there is an airlock. It is a transitional chamber. Nothing enters the ship without first being inspected in this chamber. Currently, you have no airlock. You have an open door. When someone else's anxiety approaches, it walks right into your living room. Constructing the airlock requires a shift in your cognitive architecture, specifically engaging the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain, to override the automatic resonant firing of the mirror neurons. You must move from feeling with to feeling for. This is the critical distinction between sympathetic resonance, which is involuntary, biological, and draining, and compassionate detachment, which is voluntary, conscious, and sustainable. Jung often spoke of the analyst's need to maintain an objective attitude. This does not mean he was indifferent to his patient's suffering. It meant he stood on firm ground while they drowned so that he could pull them out. If he jumped into the water with them, both would drown. You have been jumping into the water every single day. To build the psychic airlock, you must practice a technique of active visualization and labeling. When a wave of emotion hits you, you must stop and ask the cardinal question, is this mine? It sounds simple, but in the heat of the moment, it is a radical act of rebellion against your instincts. 90% of the time, the answer will be no. When you identify the emotion as foreign, you must visualize it stopping in the airlock. You observe it, you name it. This is anger. It belongs to him. It is a valid emotion, but it is not my emotion. By naming it, you engage the left hemisphere of your brain, dampening the limbic system's fire. You are no longer the emotion, you are the witness of the emotion. This is the birth of the observer self. However, there is a deeper, more esoteric trap that Jung warned us about, one that specifically targets those with high sensitivity. It is the trap of mana personality inflation. In Polynesian culture, mana refers to a supernatural power or prestige. Jung used this term to describe what happens when we touch the unconscious and begin to believe we are the power we sense. Because you can feel so much, because you can intuit things others cannot, you may begin to feel special or chosen. You might believe it is your destiny to heal everyone, to be the spiritual battery for your community. This is a delusion. It is a trick of the ego to aggrandize itself. It leads to a messianic complex where you overextend yourself until you collapse, believing your sacrifice is noble when it is actually just poor boundary management. Jung was brutal on this point. He emphasized that we are limited human beings. We are not gods. We cannot transmute the darkness of the entire world. To think you can fix everyone is not empathy. It is arrogance disguised as altruism. You must cultivate the humility of finitude. You must accept that other people have the right to their suffering. It is their journey, their karma, their psychological work to do. By taking their pain away from them before they have processed it, you are actually robbing them of their own opportunity for growth. You are acting as a psychic helicopter parent, stunting the spiritual growth of those around you by shielding them from their own consequences. Once you relinquish the need to save everyone, something miraculous happens. You stop leaking energy, your fatigue begins to lift, the fog in your head clears. You realize that your sensitivity is actually a sensory system, like a radar. A radar does not need to be hit by a missile to detect it. It simply registers the blip on the screen. You can scan a room, understand the emotional dynamics, identify who is dangerous and who is safe, and navigate through it without taking any of it home with you. This is the state of lucid empathy. But reaching this state requires a confrontation with your own fears. Why are you so afraid to set a boundary? Why does saying no feel like a life or death situation? Usually it is because your primal brain equates pleasing the tribe with survival. In our evolutionary past, being rejected by the group meant death. Your empathy is entangled with a fawn response, a trauma response. You are nice because you are afraid. Jung would ask you to integrate your inner warrior archetype to balance the caregiver. You need access to aggression, not violence, but aggression, the energy to push back, to stand your ground, to protect the sanctity of your own psyche. This brings us to the concept of the golden shadow. We often think of the shadow as purely evil, our rage, our greed, our lust. But the shadow also contains the positive traits we have repressed because they were dangerous to us as children. For the empath, the golden shadow often contains power, assertiveness, and healthy selfishness. You have locked these traits away because you were taught that good people are selfless. You must unlock them. You must reclaim your capacity to be difficult. A person who cannot be difficult cannot be truly safe. To begin this integration, you must engage in what I call microaggressions of the self. This does not mean being cruel. It means finding small, safe ways to disappoint people. Say no to a dinner invitation without offering an excuse. Let a phone call go to voicemail. Express a preference that contradicts the group. Watch the anxiety rise in your chest, the ancient fear of abandonment, and sit with it. Realize that the world does not end. Realize that people still love you, perhaps even more, because you now possess edges. You are becoming real. You are becoming a solid object in a world of ghosts. This process of integration leads us to the final and most profound realization regarding your nature. Once you have established the psychic airlock and integrated the assertiveness of the golden shadow, you stop being a victim of your sensitivity and begin to embody its true purpose. Jung did not view the psyche as a static machine, but as a self-regulating system driving toward wholeness. If nature has designed a percentage of the human population to possess this porous, hypersensitive architecture, despite the obvious evolutionary disadvantages of being easily overwhelmed, there must be a formidable reason for its persistence. Nature is ruthless. It deletes what does not work. You are still here. Therefore, you serve a function that the species cannot survive without. You are not a mistake. You are a biological instrument of high precision. In the days of our ancestors, the tribe relied on individuals like you, not for their muscle, but for their neurognosis, their nervous system's ability to know without being told. You were the one who felt the predator watching from the tall grass before a sound was made. You were the one who sensed the shifting tension in the group dynamic before the violence erupted. Your anxiety was not a disorder. It was the tribe's early warning system. In the modern world, this function has been obscured by the noise of industrial society, but the mechanism remains the same. Jung spoke of the spirit of the depths versus the spirit of the times. The masses live in the spirit of the times, surface level, distracted, disconnected. You live in the spirit of the depths. When you walk into a boardroom, a family dinner, or a relationship, you are detecting the subterranean currents, the unspoken resentments, the hidden agendas, the buried traumas. This is why people find you unsettling. You see the mask, but you react to the face beneath it. You respond to the truth they are hiding, not the lie they are presenting. This makes you a living truth detector. This is the inevitable power Jung alluded to. When an empath heals their own wound, when they stop absorbing and start observing, they develop what I call the resonant command. This is the ability to not only sense the emotional atmosphere, but to alter it. Modern physics tells us that a stronger vibration will entrain a weaker vibration. A chaotic frequency will eventually sync up with a steady, coherent frequency. Previously, because your ego was weak and your boundaries were non-existent, your frequency was unstable, so the chaos of the world entrained you. You became the chaotic room. But consider the inverse. If you cultivate a center of gravity so dense and so calm that it cannot be moved, you become the strongest frequency in the room. You stop matching their anxiety, they start matching your calm. You do not need to say a word. Your very presence, regulated by a prefrontal cortex that is in total control of the limbic system, acts as a tuning fork. You walk into a crisis, and the crisis settles because you are not feeding it. You are grounding it. This is the power of the high-functioning empath. You are no longer the sponge, you are the anchor. This transition requires you to accept a difficult truth about your relationships. You will lose people. As you solidify your boundaries and withdraw your willingness to be an emotional dumpster, the vampires and narcissists who previously flocked to you will recoil. They will accuse you of having changed. They will say you have become cold or arrogant. Let them go. This is the pruning phase of individuation. You are clearing the dead wood to make room for new growth. You are signaling to the collective unconscious that you are no longer open for exploitation. Furthermore, you must understand that your intense internal experience is a form of laboratory work. Jung believed that the individual who wrestles with the collective shadow in their own heart is doing work for the entire world. When you feel a wave of despair that seems too large for one person, it is because it is too large for one person. It is the despair of the age. By sitting with it, by refusing to project it onto others, by processing it through your own alchemical vessel, your mind, and transmuting it into understanding or art or action, you are literally reducing the amount of unconscious suffering in the world. You are filtering the psychic toxins of humanity. This is a heavy mantle to wear. It is why you feel tired. You are doing the heavy lifting of consciousness that the majority of the population refuses to do. They project their shadows. You swallow them and dissolve them with the acid of your awareness. It is a thankless, invisible task, but it is the task of the aristocracy of the spirit. Do not pray for an easier life. Do not pray to be normal, to be numb, to be like those who can walk past suffering without a second glance. Their blindness is not a blessing. It is a sleep from which they will eventually be rudely awakened. You are already awake. The pain you feel is the pain of the eyes adjusting to the light. Jung's final lesson for you is one of integration. The goal is not to ascend away from the world, but to bring the light of the unconscious into the reality of the material world. You are the bridge. You are the mediator between the two realms. You possess the capacity for bifurcated vision, to see the surface reality and the depth reality simultaneously. This gives you a strategic advantage in every domain of life, from business to romance to art. You can anticipate human behavior because you understand the engine driving it. You can forgive where others condemn because you see the wound behind the weapon. You can lead where others follow because you can feel the direction of the wind before it blows. But you must guard this power vigilantly. You must treat your energy like a limited high-value currency. Spend it only where there is a return on investment. Do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them and turn to rend you. Be selective, be discerning, be dangerous in your self-preservation. The world is shifting. We are moving into an era where emotional intelligence and the ability to navigate complex psychological terrain will be more valuable than raw intellect or brute force. The era of the thick-skinned automaton is ending. The era of the resonance architect is beginning. You have spent your life feeling like you were born on the wrong planet or in the wrong century. Jung would argue that you were simply born early. You are a prototype of what is coming next. So stop trying to fix the cracks in your armor. The cracks are how the signal gets in. Just make sure you are the one holding the remote control. Accept your burden. Honor your exhaustion as a sign of work well done. And remember that the depth of your feeling is the measure of your life. You are not broken. You are vast. See you in the next dimension.